Several models are tried to combine relationship between companies, public institutions, and university to generate innovation. In your opinion, what is the role that these actors must assume in order to generate process of innovation that are more lasting and capable of generating benefits?
Well, first of all, maybe I should introduce myself. My name is Vanderbeeken, and I'm from Experiencia. And we work a lot with governments, we work a lot with universities, and we work a lot with companies. And so I can talk about it from that point of view. I think when we think about innovation at the moment, we think a lot about Silicon Valley, and they have sort of pushed that myth, and I really call it a myth, that of these kind of hero innovators, the Steve Jobs, the Elon Musks, the people who come out of nowhere, they start a company, the company becomes big, basically purely because of the capabilities of these males, because they're always males. And they make these companies into big international conglomerates and so on. In fact, all of the Silicon Valley innovation has come with extensive support from universities, Silicon Valley, in particular Stanford University, but not only, and from government, particularly the DARPA program of the Ministry of Defense. And so the whole idea that this kind of that innovation is something that is driven by hero entrepreneurs detached from anything is completely a myth. And I think innovation has to be seen in that context, where it's all about not just about the people working in that company and setting up the innovation, but it's about new ways of working, it's about new cultures, and it's about collaborating between universities and public institutions and these flagging companies. So what is the different roles, in my opinion, from that each of these entities has to do? And I want to start from government and public services in general. I think the role of government is interesting because they really have to provide services for everybody, which is a big challenge. Not everybody is at the same level of capabilities and has the same level of technology available, and you cannot just say I'm creating something for the 25-year-olds and I don't think about the rest. Government has to work for everybody. And so that really creates an opportunity also. How do you create digital innovation that can work for everybody and where you don't exclude anybody? There is the whole, and I think there are some examples of in UK, in Italy, in France, in Scandinavian countries, where that has been done really well. Procurement is another topic where I think government can really push innovation a lot, because they can provide certain standards that private companies will have to adhere to in terms of their delivery to the government, along a series of criteria, innovation criteria, accessibility criteria, and so on. Third is, of course, legislation. Government has to push legislation that enables innovation and that facilitates innovation, doesn't block it. And finally, I think government also has a possibility, and then this connects with the role of universities, is to push interesting in sort of boundary-pushing research agendas. And I think there the role of universities and the whole educational spectrum is quite important. I was thinking, what is it that makes universities so interesting? One is that they look at their long term. They have a more longer term cycle than governments do. They're young. They have a lot of students, and they have a lot of young ideas and young people that push the agenda. They're very networked and internationally, so they're very global. And good universities should be very global and very well connected. And so they can set out this longer term vision. They can drive research, and they can also, I think, help governments and companies develop an agenda for the future on how innovation should be structured. And I think that then we come to the third one, which is companies. Companies can scale up innovation and can have this capability to see more from a commercial perspective what drives the connection between business and consumer, or between businesses directly. And of course they can, because they're commercial entities, they can create economic value for the governments, for the countries that they're in. So they provide revenue, they provide employment, and they provide also a terrain, a space in which people from those universities can then work for their lives, or also can work for a while and then go back to universities to teach, and then go back to the companies. So I think the triad of companies, universities, and public services is essential to deliver strong innovation in any country.
Designing the service through user experience is the challenge that we must be able to take up. What's it mean by this concept? However, the demands of companies and organizations change with the digital transformation?
Okay. So I've been running a company for now 15 years, partly as CEO, partly not. That's called Experiencia, basically dealing with user experience. So this is perhaps a topic it's really close to my heart. User experience, the term user is a term which comes from software. I mean, software, you have users, it's a term that comes from technology, really. But the historic roots of it are based on earlier terms like cognitive ergonomics or human-machine interaction, which dealt with how do people deal with complex systems, how do they interact with them, and especially how do they interact with them cognitively, but also emotionally and so on. It became the term user experience in, let's say, the early 2000s, when consumer technology became more prominent, and people had to deal with technology who had no, or technological services who had no professional relationship with them, but who had a more day-to-day relationship with these technologies. So the term user experience has always been about the relationship between people and technology, or people and digital services. I would say that over the years, user experience, or abbreviated UX, as it's called now, UX designer, has become a little bit commoditized, in the sense that when we talk about UX in 2019, it's often about the interface and interaction with an interface. The way I would like to position it is the more traditional way of thinking about user experience, which is that in order to make a solid digital service, or a solid public service, or a solid financial service, or whatever, you have to understand the people and their behaviors, their pain points, their aspirations, their trajectories well, and only if you understand it well, if you model that well, you can design a service that makes sense for these people, for the people that use it. So for me, designing user experience, and for us in our company, and for many companies like us, designing user experience is always about research first. So there's always an act of understanding people that comes before the design activity. In this topic of designing the user experience, or designing the human experience, as sometimes it's now being called, has now become more prevalent in the sense that when we started our business in 2005, we worked mainly with telecom operators and mobile device manufacturers and so on. And now, because of the fact that we interact more and more with any kind of service digitally, we're now talking about user experience of financial services, user experience of medical services, user experience of with public service, and also user experience in social innovation. And so socially related public services, or cooperative services and so on. So what has changed is, I think, that businesses, all kinds of businesses, are now more than before aware of the importance of user experience. So there's a stronger cultural acceptance and institutional acceptance that the user experience is a topic of primary importance, and you find more and more directly under the C-level, under the CEO level, you find a person in charge of that topic, which wasn't the case 10 years ago. It was under marketing, or it was under technology and so on. Now there is already often a digital transformation and user experience department, even also here in Italy, as I discovered even this week. I think what has changed is that, as well, is that because it's so prevalent in companies and also in governments and also in universities, is that it's no longer enough to work with consultancies like us, but people want to have these capacities also in-house and ask us to help build that capacity. So if you want to create effective digital services or effective digital transformation, one thing is to work with an agency, but it's even better to work with an agency plus having in-house capacity to take these projects forward. So it's not always being able to do everything in-house, but even at least understanding what is required to do is really important. Speed has gone up a lot. People want to get projects done very quickly. I think there is a increased request for not just do projects, but also to create a new culture in the organization, and a culture of a different way of developing a project. So what we often do now, what we do more and more is creating these kind of cultural transformations. And there are many techniques for that. One technique that I like here, that was used here in Italy with the government, is to work with virtuous people or virtuous entities within the government. So instead of doing a massive project of getting all the government aligned on a new way of working, is to select very precisely different departments or different people who are open to this, who are ambitious about this, who want to get their hands dirty on this, and then create interesting projects that work as triggers that can convince other people to jump on board. The user experience is now a term which I would say is at its peak. There is much demand for it. And there are many terms for it also. I mean, user experience is one of them. User-centered design is another one. Or human-centered design. Even design thinking, which is over the crest, I would say, as a term of fashion. At the moment, what we're also looking at is how can human experience design be integrated in a larger context of ecosystem design, and how it can be, it's not just putting the people first, but putting people and their context of living within in the context, their environment, their whole sustainability in that in place, in first.